Hi everyone, this is Dr. Raquel Butler from Integrated Veterinary Therapeutics.
And Sophie Vandenberg from Equine Postulate. And we welcome you to the Equine Functional Posture Podcast, your ultimate source for insights into the influence of functional posture on biomechanics, health, and overall well-being of horses.
Whether you're a seasoned equestrian, an equine professional, or simply a horse enthusiast, this podcast is designed to help you understand the critical aspects of functional posture.
Tune in each week as we discuss practical tips, delve into expert interviews, and explore the latest research in the impact of functional posture on equine anatomy, physiology, movement, and more.
Let's create a world where we empower our horses to be in a mental, emotional, and physical balance. Hi everyone, welcome to this episode where we're going to have a chat about in-hand work. How are you going today, Sophie?
Hi Raquel, I'm going really well. This is going to be an awesome conversation because we've had so many discussions about it. So I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, it is. It's something that I've learned a fair bit about over the last 5 or so years, I would say. No longer than that. No, way longer than that,
Hey,
actually.
you introduced it to me like eight plus years ago.
So yeah, no, it's probably like 9 years or something. And I started working with it with Henry, who was my off-the-track thoroughbred, and he really showed me the value of working closely with his body to help him develop better postural strength and stability. So if we define in hand, because there's a lot of people who might not understand what we're talking about, what are some of the ways that we would define working in hand?
So it's in hand, obviously, it's not a written exercise. It's usually a close up or, somewhat close exercise where you're on the ground with the horse and you often have a connection to them via a cavesson, halter, or a bridle, something like that, where you're connected. I think some people do a little bit at liberty in hand, but you have, really a great connection often through a rope with horses. And there's a distinction to be made for in hand work as opposed to common lunging of a horse or standard groundwork where you're thinking quite mechanically about, the horse just stepping under or the horse turning very tightly on the ground. It's a more specific understanding of their body intentionally to create a mind-body connection for them for healthy posture. What else?
Yeah, I think one of the things that I learned was that it is a skill, and um, it's a little bit like riding, in that you learn how to ride, except I feel like it's a bit harder because you for it to really work, you both have to be very independent. And I know you'd say that with riding as well, but um, there's a lot of influence of the rider on the horse generally, from their seat, from their legs, from their hands, from their whole body position, their balance, and all of that. Whereas when you're working together in hand, you still have a lot of influence, but it's not a physical influence. Like it's generally the more that the horse is working independently, the better that it is. So you're actually both working quite independently, but subtly helping each other, and it's more you helping the horse. But I found it quite challenging to begin with because I would want to hold, I'd want to, if they started to push, I'd start to push back. I'd try to micromanage them a fair bit. Micromanaging can be beneficial, but when you start to physically kind of micromanage, then that's not really creating an independent posture and balance. And it's taken me a lot to develop the coordination and body awareness myself to stay not strong, centered is probably the word. So, stay centered and grounded within myself, within my position, within what I'm asking, be very clear about my intentions of what I want to achieve with the horse. I think that was a big learning curve for me, like actually understanding what am I asking, how am I asking it, what are my expectations here. Um, and then allowing them to go through the process, like we were just talking about this before recording, like allowing the horse to find that movement within themselves, as opposed to, yeah, like some groundwork movements where you're like, you have to move now. I need you to disengage your hindquarter. I need you to move your shoulder. I need you to step backwards. The
Yeah,
way that
step
I
on the,
think,
like stop on the spot,
yeah,
that
like
real.
stop quick. Yeah. And the way I think about in hand is it's a conversation with the horse. Like, can you please step your hind leg? Can you please step into shouldering? Can you please find your best backwards motion? Like it's even reading, I've got a lot of books on in hand, and even reading some of them, they're quite mechanical in their way, but I think that for me in hand it becomes a two-way conversation where the horse can say, actually that step is a little bit difficult for me, um you know and then you think about, oh, how can I make it easier for you then? Like, could I allow you a little more forward? Could I give you more time, which we were just talking about? you know can I just make it smaller? Can I make it slower? Can I just reward you for the little tries and things like that? So, yeah, for me, in hand creates a lot of opportunity um, for that like level of communication and awareness of yourself and the horse as kind of independent, connected, grounded beings in their own right, and then developing that communication between the two. So if we just think about like just the actual value for the horse, like what's some of the values of doing in hand for the horse? Um,
One large one is that there's no weight on them,
mm,
really. As much as riding can be great, there is value in the horse not having a rider on them for exercises. That includes the fact that we'll get into it, and like the fact that older horses and younger horses can, benefit from this. Horses who aren't being ridden. That means that you have, like you were saying, it's just another opportunity to explore what you can do with your horse without there being, a weight on their back. And that includes a saddle, it includes you, all kinds of things. Other things that add value for them are aids. It's a great opportunity for them to learn aids either isolated from other pressure. So that includes like you teach them to respond to cues for lateral work and anything with in isolation from also having the pressure of the saddle or having the weight of your body or the weight of your hands. You can be very specific with your aids and the application of them, and the horse can be very clear about isolated aids, especially when they're learning them for the first time.
mm,
Has a lot of value. Other things that can be great for them are body awareness. So really that just ties into all the things that you were just talking about. Them having the ability to ground and be very centered in their own body as a reflection of you as you support them to doing that. And that ties into the whole concept of a functional posture, because your body awareness really needs to improve if you want to enhance your postural skills
mm,
and you're seeking a better way of moving. And lots of horses need that, because lots of horses have either dysfunctional postures or movement patterns that aren't serving them. So the body awareness, it's really imperative on the road to gaining your functional posture back.
mm.
Um, what else do you think adds value for the horse?
Um, I think even just the variation, like for some horses, the in-hand work can be very challenging mentally and physically. So, it for some horses they might enjoy that aspect of variation and focus, but for other horses, it could be, it's actually like I remember with Henry, we used to have a trade-off because for him the in-hand work was it was very fatiguing, both physically and mentally, because he struggled with his body control. Um, and certain movements were quite difficult for him, and my field would not have been what it is now. Like I was learning at that point too. So, I'm sure that I could have helped him more, like if I was doing it now. But so our little trade-off was like, you work for me in hand, and then we would have a little fun Liberty session where we'd play chasey with each other and he'd get to run around the arena and have some fun. So, but it does create that variation, like mentally and physically, which is always, we've done a podcast recording on the importance of variation in training. So I think that's really valuable. It also, like you mentioned, the body awareness, and like we talked about how we can use it. Or did we talk about that yet? But like we're going to talk about how we can use it for training new things. Oh, no, you did mention that, didn't you? Like you can use it for starting to introduce new ways of moving. And that's where I see a massive value, because what I've noticed is that when I show a horse how to do something in a very slow and controlled manner, breaking it down to one step, it can be mind-blowing for the horse. Like their whole nervous system is like, whoa, and they can sometimes go into quite a deep processing state. But the next time they do that step, like if I've given them enough time for their nervous system to process, enough time for the neural pathways to start to establish that pattern of motion, the next time I do it, it will always be better. And if it's not better, then I did something wrong. I asked for too much. There was too much brace. There was not a recognition of the actual movement, or um, or I just didn't give them enough time to process that. So for me, that's massive value, because it's rare when we're riding them that we'll do one step and stop. And I remember when I was teaching both Patch and Jelly Travert, so hindquarter in, hopefully I've got that around the right way, but they both found that really, really difficult. They both had lumbar issues, like Patch had kind of hind limb control issues, Jelly's had like a lot of tension in his hind end, and it was so hard for them. Jelly initially would get anxious and bite me. I'm trying to remember what Patch would do. I think she'd do a similar thing or just kind of push through. I broke it down to the one step, which, we talk about that a lot in the EFP course. And I incorporated for Jelly a little bit of positive reinforcement because it was so hard for him. And it was just like next time, every session from that point. And I mean, he could only do one step for I don't remember how many sessions, but for quite a while, until he offered me the second step. So I didn't progress until he held his balance through that whole first step. He didn't go through a deep processing place, and he felt like he was able to continue to the next step. And it seems really slow. People might be like, are you serious? Like, that's so slow. But every day there was an improvement. And now, I can do as many steps as I ask for, slow and controlled, in balance, in the walk, holding himself. So there's a huge value for the horse in that kind of recognition of motion and recognition of neural pathway connection, and then the value that has as you step them up the levels. Like if they don't have that level of awareness in the slow and controlled movement, you can never expect a good quality of half pass, in the canter. Like,
And not just like expression of movement, we're talking about the integrity of the movement. Like when you say a high quality half pass, we're talking about a horse who can open up the body and move without brace, including strength and, a very functional movement that serves their body and opens their joints healthily without restriction, not just, a giant expressive movement. Functional for the horse, for sustainable movement that serves their body for longevity.
which, puts it back on us a little bit, right? Because we then have to recognize, well, what is that quality of movement that we're actually looking for? Because I remember having this moment with Patch where I was like, what am I actually asking for here? Like, I want it to end up in I don't know, we'll say a shoulder in, but I'm like, then I thought about, hang on, but what's the breakdown of this to end up there? And I had to really ask myself, do I even know what that looks like? and I wasn't clear. I was clear of kind of where I wanted it to end, but I wasn't clear on what the process looked like as she was, you know, giving me the little increments towards it. And so I had to break it down much further and clarify, did I actually understand what a shoulder in was? You know, do I actually understand the biomechanics of that? How should the rib cage move? Or, you know, what about the outside shoulder? Or what should the pelvis do? You know, like all these things that I looked at very linearly in the motion. Because you're standing there watching it now and you're not riding it,
Yeah.
you really have to understand what you're looking for. And I think that's so valuable then when you're on the horse, because you have a much better, clearer visual of what it looks like for the horse. So I think that's a massive value. That's for the horse and you know, the horse in terms of
Yeah.
the movement build up, but you in terms of understanding the biomechanics of the movement.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think too, what you were saying about how with every session you're seeing an improvement just shows that the body wants to move well, and that when you make that information available, it will absorb it on a deeper level and then express it in its motion, whether it's a small change or a larger change, because horses want to move well with synchronicity. They want to move, I think, and this came up in our conversation with Mel about the fact that when you can show them that there's a nicer way of feeling in their motion, that not only do they, you know, the body wants to be functional, but they actually enjoy the movement as well. So it's an emotional, it's a higher emotional state for them to be in a better state of movement, which comes back to well-being and a standard of welfare too, on a quite a refined level.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. The more aware that we can be of that, I think that just adds a lot of value to us and to the horse. Um,
Definitely.
and you know, when we talk about in-hand work, there's so many values from a training perspective as well. So, you know, we've kind of touched on there the value for the horse, but in terms of progressing your horse from a training perspective, so yeah, what are some of the aspects there?
Sorry, could you say that again? Can't.
From a training aspect, you know, so the things that we're kind of working on. So, you know, for example, you know, we can just look at familiarization with equipment and working on
Yeah.
different positions of the handler. Like it's been integral for Ellie Mae, she's my young horse, familiarizing her with the stick and making it a positive experience, like the stick or the wand, which is the Tellington touch people call it, which I love. You know, it becomes an extension of my arm rather than a telling kind of aid. And Mel's also really helped me with that as well. And being able to, or even, you know, familiarization with a bit, like you could have the bit in, but we're working in hand in a cavesson or a halter. So they're learning to move with feeling the bit on the tongue. Familiarization of well, yeah, different sorts of pressure, like from the nose, from the bit.
Yeah.
Um,
It's really a training repertoire, isn't it? Like it's the
yeah,
inclusion of lots of new skills themselves. And even though it comes under sort of the psychological side of training, the fact that you bring down, you know, the introduction of equipment or the use of them or the use of aids in isolation, you know, to have them when you introduce things for the first time, the horse doesn't actually know what to expect of a new cue or a new aid. So even if they have confidence in the fact that you treat them well, you know, kindly, and you titrate things in when new things come in, they still don't often have expectations about a certain aid or, you know, a bit or the wand, whatever you're using. So if you can bring that in without all the additional factors that also, that they're thinking about absorbing, maybe still cause a little bit of residual stress, you're going to allow them the time and the space to process something new without having to think about lots of other things at the same time.
Yeah, and I
And
think that
yeah,
comes into learning something new also in terms of a new movement, So say you are starting to introduce laterals, then introducing them on the ground and allowing the horse to establish that movement pattern themselves, like we said earlier, without the influence of other pieces of equipment, is so valuable for them when you want to transfer it into ridden, like the first step of hindquarters or shoulder in or half pass. Like I know a lot of young horses who aren't started who are able to do half pass in the walk on the ground with very limited pressure, if that makes sense. Like they're able just to do it without even a stick, they're just, the owner puts up their hand and the horse half passes towards them really beautifully, really softly. And these horses are not even started yet, but they have that level of self-awareness and body control and relaxation in different
right.
movements that we should be aiming for before we think about riding horses at any age.
Yeah.
So it's super good for, yeah, and even at a higher level, when you're starting to introduce collection and like piaffe and passage, it can be really useful for the horse to feel those movements without having to deal with the weight and the balance and the push and pull of the rider. So a lot of like masters will introduce those things on the ground. The other thing I just want to say before I forget about it is, like, I was working with Ellie Mae this morning in hand, and so I was actually doing in-hand stuff at Liberty. But the interesting thing was that she was happy for me to be on her left-hand side. And with the halter and lead rope, obviously you have a different direction. So she didn't really show me as much that she wasn't as happy for me to be on my right-hand side, on her right-hand side. But when I asked her to, I think I was asking her to move, maybe do a slight leg yield over to the left. So I was on her right hand side and she put me back on her left hand side. So that for me was a communication that I'm finding what you're asking me difficult to do that way, but you can hop back on the other side and do it because that was easier. And I know that she's got some things going on that right hand side. So I understand why, because I put all my observation skills together and I'm like, she's not just being difficult and not allowing me on her right hand side. She didn't show me that with a halter and lead rope on. So, that was the value of in hand at Liberty. So the horse's responses to what you ask them is really important. And then if they're giving you a certain response, like they do it on one side, but they don't do it on the other, and you've taken out saddle, rider, bridle, there's a reason. So it
Yep.
actually gives you a lot of feedback about their body comfort and mechanics from
Their
that.
underlying motivational factors. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, so then you just have to look further if you're getting that feedback. Um, but it's also
Nice.
really useful, like what I just said there, to then observe the horse for their feedback. So what are some other things that we can look at, because the other thing is we have our eyes when we're on the ground. So we can see the horse. It is so valuable to be able to
Yeah.
actually see the horse. So what are some things that people can see when they're doing in hand with their horse that, can help them understand their balance of the horse?
Well, simply because your perspective from the ground as opposed to maybe being on their back has totally changed, you can see their legs a lot clearer. One, where their foot placement is, how they are using the limb, where they're lifting from, whether or not they are or aren't flexing certain parts of their limb, or even, simply I was working with a horse the other day, and it wasn't until in the bodywork session where we were, doing an assessment, and she said, "Oh, he does fantastic circles." And he did do circles really well, but we didn't know until we were on the ground together watching him that his right hind, when he has to bring it around on the outside of a tight circle, he drags it really badly and it knocks behind his left fetlock. And we were like, well, she was completely surprised. She said, I've never looked at his legs when we were doing that turn. And obviously they turn on the ground, you know, where they lead in and out of gates and also lunging on the ground. But until she had been intentional about where she was placing her attention and saying, oh, yeah, I need to pay attention to that as we spoke. And I told her what I was looking for. She said, oh, I've never seen that before. But he does spin beautifully.
Yeah.
So, you know, that's one piece of feedback that sometimes, and you can't blame yourself for not seeing those things, but there is value in learning the skill of seeing the placement and paying attention to certain things. So yeah, the use of the legs, and not just in a mechanical fashion about how quickly they move or how specific they are. Other things might include the alignment of the spine. That might be where you see bend. You mentioned the rib cage, and with patch and speaking to yourself about what am I really looking for and how do I know whether what I'm looking for is or isn't the true definition of functional for my horse.
Mm.
And what am I looking at? Other things include head and neck positions, which are big topics of conversation in lots of spaces, particularly, you know, the horse is behind the vertical or in front of the vertical, or the head is low or too high. But there's other things you can look at too, including brace, bend, willingness to have different head and neck postures, for example. And my other one, this is one of my favorites, is facial expression.
Mm.
I say it lots of times on the podcast, but I do lots of work with foals, and most of my timing is honestly based on their blink rate, the softness of the eye, how engaged they are, whether they're sleeping, and using their ears as well, you know, what they're paying attention to. I think that the facial expression is, it's been a humbling journey for me because personally, if you'd asked me 15 years ago what I looked at a horse, I can't remember my horse's expressions in my
Mm.
teens. Not that I had a huge amount of horse experience, but I didn't think to look in my horse's eye to read how they felt about something or to see how engaged they were with me. Um, it honestly wasn't something that crossed my mind, maybe even until I met you at uni, and I stopped thinking of horses more like livestock and thinking about how they were feeling as we're doing things. But the facial expression, I think, is one of the most valuable things you get from being on the ground,
Mm.
and having that connection with them. What other things are you looking for feedback wise when you're on the ground?
Yeah, I think all of those things, obviously. But one aspect that I find is as a part of in hand, like I do a lot of walking backwards. And so that's a skill that you have to develop yourself. I'm not as good at walking backwards as I used to be. I don't have as good spatial and body awareness myself due to a disc compression, but walking backwards is really, it's actually really good for your nervous system. It's quite valuable from that perspective for you. Um, but it's really valuable because that's where you can see all those things that you just mentioned. So walking backwards, like I can look at the head position and that alignment of the spine. So is the neck following through the wither, you know, through the thoracic spine, through the hind end? If I'm on a curve, is the whole spinal alignment on the curve, or do I have a bulge of the shoulder out one way or a bulge of the rib cage out one way? Or like you said, with the alignment of the limbs, do I have one hind leg going outside the alignment or one hind limb coming in under the body where it should be going straight and following the front legs? Or or do I have like kind of brace in that? And you know, you mentioned with the facial expressions, and it's interesting because I just remember Patch's facial expression, like when I started working with her. And that's when I really became aware of facial expressions as well. And she like would just screw up her whole nose and her eyes. And whenever we initially were doing in-hand work, she'd just push me and she'd just screw everything up. And she was just like, what is the point of this crap? Like basically,
Yeah.
like I don't understand why we're doing this. Like just just do something. Anyway, but over time, as she got more body control, body awareness, more relaxation, like her facial expression changed so much. Like her tight lips got so much softer. She didn't have that tight like chin. Her eyes got softer. Like just her whole face just softened. And there was a point at which, you know, it was actually out on the lunge, but she'd be going along and her face was so soft that her teeth were like softly kind of hitting together, like in a really soft, you know, when you're just so relaxed, you're like, she was kind of doing that. And I've seen it with Jelly as well now, where he's just going along and his whole face is, and you just see this beautiful softness. The ears are soft and kind of gently forward. The whole muzzle is soft, and there's just like this gentle movement happening in the face flowing through the entire body. Like it's so cool to see. So it doesn't mean that the face doesn't have tension when things are difficult, because I mean Jelly gives me a little worry, a little line under his eye when I don't give him the carrot, you know. That's a different facial expression where he's like, just give me the carrot. So, but that's, yeah, really helpful because you're so close when you're in hand, so you can really read those facial expressions and start to go, oh, this is difficult. Oh, this is not so difficult. You know, they're, yeah, getting frustrated. Like you can start to recognize different emotions for your horse, and they express them all a little bit differently. I think the other thing is your self-awareness, which is very valuable as we kind of touched on, but you know, how much, I think one of the hardest things in hand is getting rid of the brace in yourself. So softening, like how much brace do you have in your arms or your hands when you're holding, whether you're on a cavesson or a lead, a halter and lead rope, and um your ability to kind of soften and what I call open the door and allow your horse to move, and how your posture can have like a massive influence on the horse. And when you see that on the ground, you know, it gives you a bit more recognition of how that can influence them. Also, when you're on them, when you've got a physical, they're physically feeling your posture. Like, you know, I can breathe and Ellie stops. I can lift and she goes. I can, you know, open my arm and she goes forward. I can draw back and she'll come towards me. Like it can become such a valuable form of communication and but self-awareness of you. Um, and your level of feel and your ability not to brace. And I think that's been a massive learning curve for me too. Like just it's enhanced my feel so much by doing in-hand work, more than I could ever have done by riding my horse. Like I don't think I could ever enhance my whole body. Like you need to feel that independently first before you can translate that onto the horse. And the better I am at that, the better my horse's posture is, and the more they respond to really subtle cues. So that's a really big training aspect, I think. Yeah.
Definitely. You know, actually, I just thought then of the other day, I was doing something in hand with the foal, just leading, and I had the news on. It was really bad news. And everything was like it was just a disaster for a few minutes before I realized. And I was so tense in my back and in my pelvis listening to bad news on the radio. And just how I was feeling translated into, I think, not just my intention behind my movement, but subconsciously influenced the way that I was moving, like how tense and braced I was doing stuff. So yeah, that just reminded me just how influential the feeling, like, and the awareness that you have of your own body
Yeah, and your
as
own
you're
thoughts.
doing, and your own thoughts as you're doing things. Another thing well, I suppose that comes into having, improved communication, doesn't it? Like between the two of you, and how tuned they are to your own body. What you were saying about Ellie and your ability to change your energy and your motion so slightly. And she's so in tune with you because she knows that it has meaning. And you know that she's going to be honest about how
Hmm.
she's feeling, and her movement has meaning. Um, that's improved your communication. You had such a strong communication with Patch, but she was still so generous. It didn't take anything away from you guys achieving goals. It's not like, I think there seems to be a misconception that if you constantly say pander to the horse's needs, that they're not going to give you anything, or you're not going to have any training left over, everything's going to go out the window. And I think underpinning that is the whole sense that the horse is not going to do what you want them to do. Like it's an
Yeah.
obedience thing. I don't think my horse is going to want to sidestep if I'm respectful of their needs in sidestep, because at the end of the day, you apply pressure. In many spaces, we apply pressure, the horse does the action, we take the pressure away. And deep down, I think there are spaces where horses do want to work with us, but underlying it, we do make them do things. And sometimes when you give them grace, it feels, even as somebody and I know lots of people in the equine functional posture course bring this up all the time, the space between do this and can you do this? I know we
Yeah.
had a discussion about this. Yeah. And if I don't make you do it, are you going to stop doing it altogether?
And is that you misbehaving because you're not like listening to me?
Yes, absolutely. And
I've noticed the opposite with that. Like when I do improve that level of communication, which in hand is integral for that, my horses try more for me, but they also hold me accountable if I ask them to do something that they are finding physically or mentally difficult. So another example with Ellie, because I was doing in-hand stuff with her this morning, was, and this has improved, right? So over a couple of sessions, this has improved, but I was asking her, can you step, towards me with your shoulder one way, the other way? She's like, yep. Can you step towards me with the hind end? One step. I just want one step of your hind quarter coming towards, and then can you do it from the other side? Well, from one side of her hind quarter, she is like, the other day she said, no, I can't do it. It's not possible. So, the answer to that could be, well, I ask harder until she steps. Or I make it easier for her by allowing her to step forward a little bit, or like open the door a little bit, because I know, like I said before, that from an observation perspective, there's things going on there. She's had a number of injuries to that side, to her front leg, her back leg, her abdominals. And the more you can observe that, the more I can understand the behavior, as opposed to going, oh, you're just being difficult with that leg. So I waited that day until she found the motion. I made it easier for her. I allowed her a little step forward. And then today, it's not as good a step as the other way, but within a few seconds she gave me a step. Like she's like, okay, I get it. Without, like, there was a bit of brace, so now it's going to be refining that, slowing it down, and allowing her to like find a better quality of that motion. Um, But, I have to be very respectful of her communication. And it is difficult with a young horse because you're always questioning, like, is it them pushing the boundaries or is it them communicating?
yeah,
And the more we know, the more we can give them the benefit of the doubt that it's communication, um, as opposed to going, oh, you just need to step that hind leg over.
Yeah.
And Jelly's the same. When he's not good, he struggles with backup,
Yeah.
so in hand backup. And I do it very slow and controlled. It's not a training response for him to back up. It's got to be with body awareness, body control, relaxation. And when
Yeah.
he's not feeling good in his pelvis and his hind end, he nips me. And if I don't listen, he won't connect, he'll just mouth me. But if I
Yeah.
don't listen, he will nip.
Yeah.
And I could reprimand him for that and say, well, that's not okay. But I've promoted his level of communication. So why shouldn't he be allowed to tell me that that is uncomfortable and that I need to respect that, and respecting that builds his trust in me and his confidence in me that I've got his back and that I'm doing my best to listen. So yeah, it really helps. In-hand stuff really helps a lot with building that relationship.
Relationship. Yeah, definitely. And, you know, the things that people can do in hand, I mean, in the context of what you actually do in hand, how would you describe, those kind of things that you can do with your horse on the ground?
Yeah, I think the first place to start, which we do in the equine functional posture course, is one step, one step of the hind limb in the best possible position that it can be. So like we talk about hind limb step and we say like the most forward and the most medial that it can go without twisting and without the horse being uncomfortable or like losing their balance, and then kind of doing 5 steps. So one step, whether it's forward, back, hind quarter, shoulders, um, with relaxation, the more relaxation we can get, like sometimes you got to train the aid first and then, go so they understand the aid and then take it to a place of relaxation and then becoming body aware. And we also do it with obstacles as well. So in hand, like we in the equine functional posture course, we talk about using one pole to create body awareness, awareness of proprioception and balance. And that's a really valuable exercise in so many ways. Like it gives so much information how a horse responds and steps over one pole. Um, and you can then build that up to other obstacles like stepping over more poles, a bridge, a raised pole,
Yeah.
all sorts of things. But that's so valuable to work with obstacles in hand if you're thinking about the way the horse is using their body over that obstacle. It's not just about doing the poles. It's got to be done with awareness of the body and the biomechanics of the body. Um, what else would you say from an in-hand perspective that it can be so useful for?
Um, Particularly rehabilitation. There's
Hmm.
lots of aspects of rehabilitation that people are beginning to see are really important, such as, rehab either as an alternative to or in complementary before or after to things like kissing spine surgery,
Yeah.
things like sacroiliac disease, things where you really do have to have an understanding of how the body is moving in order to make an evaluation of whether or not what you're doing is serving your horse's body. And that really just encompasses everything we've just talked about. The view you have of the horse, your understanding of their motion, and your understanding or your ability to encourage them using your own body cues and awareness to improve the
Mm.
function of their motion. And then, I mean, rehabilitation, there's also prehabilitation,
Yeah.
which is doing what you can do before anything has gone wrong so that your horse has the best opportunity of avoiding injury, to have, you know, functional tissue that opens and closes joints in a way that nourishes them with synovial fluid.
Mm.
And they have motion in the direction that's healthy for each of the joints, whether that's rotation in parts of the spine, flexion or extension through the lumbosacral, all the joints of the fore and hind limb, rotation, the correct movements through the first and second cervical vertebra, as well as the skull on the spine. All of those things, being able to read them, that's prehabilitation. That's nourishing the body to prevent injury if you can. Other things include, oh, were you about to say something?
Yeah, I was going to say the thing that comes in with prehabilitation is starting young horses.
Yeah.
So um, doing all of this stuff in hand before thinking about getting on them just does exactly what you said, except in a preparation for them to be able to take a rider. And we can I think we did talk a little bit about it with Mel, like in terms of the posture and things that we're looking for before a horse takes a rider. But doing in-hand work is so valuable. Like I go to clinics with Tori Jeffries, and she's got a number of young horses, doing in-hand work before their ridden career is even thought about being started. It establishes the communication and the relaxation, and the postural stability and the strength, and so, and also the ability to introduce new exercises to those horses. But then if we move on from starting horses to our older horses, then we can build on things like collection, and teaching them those new exercises before, as we said earlier, before they take a rider.
Yeah.
So, yeah, like if we were kind of summarizing, if we give a couple of points each, I think my points would be that it's a really valuable skill to add to your repertoire as a horse person. I used to be one of those people who just wanted to ride, and that if I wasn't riding, I was kind of wasting time, or I don't know, just it was a bit boring. But then when I really got into the in-hand, which was more with Patch, because she was a small pony and she couldn't take me riding her very often. And I really loved it, and I really found a joy in the communication and the connection and the relationship that it established with my horse, and the little changes that I was making and the improvement, and that she'd look like she'd had a bodywork session after I'd done an in-hand session. Like, so I think it's such a valuable skill to have, that every person should try to enhance their skills and be patient with yourself as you're learning. It's not easy for some people to establish, like it takes time, but it will also benefit your writing and your other observation skills as well. So that's probably one of my big takeaways from all of this.
Yeah, definitely. And I suppose for me, I would say that feedback is a really big, summary point, because the discussion between you and your horse and all the points we touched on, the communication they give you and what you communicate to them with your aids, your body, your intention, they just add up to enhancing your relationship. And not just as a gimmicky word, but like all the things that we just talked about that go into that, what they tell you and what you tell them, and the grace that you give them as they learn. And also the fact that, in hand work, not just groundwork or lunging, it creates the new movement pathways.
Yeah,
That in
especially
its,
doing it in a slow and controlled, aware manner.
yeah, to improve their posture and increase function, and to have them absorb that on a really deep nervous system level. Other things include teaching new skills. So mental stimulation, that's adds value for them. We have an episode on variability of training, and under that comes, mental stimulation and variable aspects to that. And also postural strength and stability, particularly for the horse's core muscles. A lot of horses don't have the best core muscles, even when we think they do, or they have a level of fitness, but it doesn't reflect true core strength, the abdominals and their ability to engage their core
Mm.
for integrity, particularly of the spine.
Yeah, and then the last thing I'd like to say just before we sign off is an in-hand session can be very short. So I've seen value with my horses in going out and spending like 5 or 10 minutes. If I'm targeted in what is in that 5 or 10 minutes, and it's very aware, um, then like there's always an improvement in that. So like when I guess the other reason I became quite good at in-hand work was I was time poor. And so I was like, I don't have time to go get my saddle out, go get all my things out, saddle up the horse, unsaddle the horse, wash the horse off, all the things. I can just grab my horse out with a halter and lead rope or stick a cavesson on if I want a cavesson and take a stick if I want to stick, and like I'm ready. I can go out, do a small in-hand session and know that tomorrow my horse will be better off for doing that.
Yeah.
So that's a huge like value to me of doing in hand is like if you're limited with time, you can still do something extremely valuable for you and your horse, that will put them in a better position next time, when maybe in a few days you can ride, and that ride will be better because you did 10 minutes of in-hand work a few days ago. So just don't underestimate the value of a small amount of time, with a lot of rest, and processing in there. Like it's yeah, we've had numerous people on our equine functional course be like, I've only been doing like, 5 minutes. They might be doing 5 minutes a day, or they might be doing 5 to 10 minutes 2 to 3 times a week. And they're like, oh my God, I can see such a difference in my horse. And it's like, yeah, you can make a big difference to posture. I'm not talking about fitness, like cardiovascular fitness, that's different. But you can make a big difference to posture with very little time if you are aware of what exercise is going to work for your horse.
Yeah, definitely.
Awesome. Well, thank you for joining myself, Dr. Raquel Butler, and Sophie Vandenberg in today's podcast. Enjoy your horse time. Please subscribe to the Equine Functional Posture podcast so you don't miss our weekly episodes, and give us a 5-star rating so that we can share more valuable insights to everyone. The next level 1 equine functional posture course begins on 17th of February, which we're very excited about. So please click in the link in the episode notes to learn more about the course.
We'll see you in the next exciting episode.